A very warm welcome to all of you. Today I'm going to be taking my lecture on minimal intervention dentistry. So this is going to be a two-part lecture again, and in the first part I'll be giving a brief introduction about what minimal intervention dentistry is, and I'm going to be differentiating between how caries management used to be done traditionally in the time of Green Vardiman Black, and how it is practiced now, and how it is the trend for the future, and how we can minimize and prevent your caries attacks in patients right now. The second part will be covering the restorative part. Okay, so let's begin. So like I was saying, during the era of GB Black, there wasn't exactly any material which was a dental material which was available, which could actually prevent tooth decay and which could actually bond to the tooth structure, because of which GB Black had no option but to preach the concept of extension for prevention. So as you all remember, when you would have done your preclinical exercises, when you had to prepare your cavities for amalgam preparations. Now, because amalgam does not bond to the tooth per se, you have to create retentive features. You have to create large cavities so that you can accommodate a bulk of the restorative material, and you have to create retentive features like converging walls and rounded angles and large cavity design, at least a minimum amount of bulk of 1.5 to 2 mm of cavity depth and width. So all of these factors, what happen? They affect the healthy tooth structure. So it's not just the carious lesion which you are removing during your cavity prep, but you are also sacrificing healthy amount of tooth structure. And this was because at that point of time we did not have restorative materials which are actually anti-cariogenic, and which did not bond to the tooth structure. However, this concept has now changed ever since restorative materials like glass ionomer cement were introduced in the early 1970s by Wilson and Kent. And of course, we have our composite restorative materials also, which although do not bond to the tooth, but they micro mechanically can be retented to the tooth surface. So now the concept has changed from extension for prevention to prevention for extension. So now you are preventing the preparation or cutting of your healthy tooth structure to extend the life of your sound tooth. Yeah, so this is how the concept has changed over time. So, what is minimal intervention dentistry? It is the philosophy of professional care which deals with the first occurrence, the earliest detection, and the earliest cure of the disease on micro levels, followed by the treatment, the minimally invasive treatment to repair the irreversible damage which is caused by that disease. So, more than waiting for the patient to actually come with large carious lesions, you would like to screen the patient at regular intervals, make sure that there are no carious attacks. You can modify the diet, you can modify your treatment plan, incorporate the role of fluoride, mouth rinses like chlorhexidine and Listerine, and you can educate the patient, and you can use restorative materials like GIC, which incorporate fluoride and which release fluoride over a period of time, because of which you can prevent further caries attacks, and you can use minimally invasive treatments, because now you do not need to create such large cavities. So even for your basic pit and fissures, you don't need to actually create the traditional concept type class 1 restoration cavity preparation. You can just use your normal pit and fissure sealants, and for small cavities you can just use your composite restorations, because of which you can actually prevent the sacrificing of healthy tooth structure. So coming to the aspects of MID, what are the aspects? These are the basis on which minimal intervention dentistry exists. You have to diagnose caries at the earliest. So the earliest would be your incipient or invisible caries. So the white spot lesions, if I may. So as soon as you recognize that there are white spot lesions, there is actually no need to treat them or operate on them, because white spot lesions are reversible. So you just have to incorporate fluoride. You can give your fluoride varnish, or you can apply topical fluoride and fluoride mouthwashes, because of which this incipient caries can actually be remineralized and reversed. Then of course there is the classification of caries. So as soon as you identify the caries on the surface of the tooth, you have to assess what type of caries is it. Then you have to assess the risk of the individual, the caries risk of the individual to caries attack. So this is now being done whenever the patient walks into the clinic. We have a caries risk chart which has to be filled in. So that helps us to assess the individual caries risk. We have to play a role in the reduction in cariogenic bacteria. So this is how I was mentioning, you can incorporate the use of fluorides and mouthwashes, and the patient's change in diet, and the oral health care plan. And then we focus on remineralization. This is for the incipient and early carious lesions only. Of course, once it is already compromised, once it is no longer no longer reversible, of course we have to do our minimal surgical intervention. But then again, please focus on the word minimal. So you don't actually have to create a very large cavity. You can only remove the existing lesion and then restore it suitably using a suitable restorative material. And we focus now on repair rather than replacement. So if we have a large restoration which is present, but of course it cannot be an amalgam restoration. So if it is an amalgam restoration, we cannot repair it, we have to replace the entire thing. But if we have an existing composite restoration, and clinically and radiographically we see that the base of the restoration, that is the lower part of the restoration, is sound, there is no secondary caries, and we can only see that the restoration is stained and it is fractured only in the top part, then instead of replacing the entire restoration, we only focus on the repair. So we only remove the portion of the composite which is damaged and the area which is stained, and then of course we just replace it with new composite restoration. So composite can bond to composite, so that is not an issue. And then of course we have to assess the outcomes at regular intervals. This is nothing but your patient recall. So depending upon the caries risk. So if the patient is at high caries risk, we would prefer to call the patient every 3 months, but low to moderate risk, biannual recall should suffice. Now, detection and diagnosis. Early caries diagnosis and classification of caries is going to be covered now, and I will be explaining about the various types of early caries diagnosis. These are your recent advances which you would have studied in the Department of Oral Medicine as well. And classification of caries, now of course we are using the ICIDAS system, but I will be talking about the Mountain Humes classification also. It's always good to know that there is another classification of caries which is available, which can be used. And prevention is what I'm going to be dealing with today. The restoration and recall I will be dealing with in the next class. Okay. So coming to the detection and the diagnosis, I'm sure you have heard of all of these before. The fiber optic translumination is nothing but you are creating a very strong beam of light, you're projecting it onto the tooth surface, and this helps you to diagnose your early carious lesions, especially interproximal caries. So when you are generally screening the patient clinically under the normal light, the normal dental light, sometimes we may miss out on certain interproximal regions where we may feel that it is not under caries attack. However, if we are in doubt, we can use the fiber optic transillumination. We can even use fluorescence, and we can actually project a strong beam of light, because of which we will actually be able to see the caries attack. So basically, when light is projected on, the sound tooth structure will let the light pass through very nicely, and you will get a clear picture. But the caries will actually not be able to let the caries attack region will not be able to let the light pass through, because of which you will actually be able to see the defect very clearly. Yeah, so that is how that is the principle on which the fiber optic transillumination and the fluorescence are going to be working. In the electrical impedance, basically we are just subjecting the tooth to a small electrical charge, that is the alternating current, and the healthy tooth structure will give a difference, will give a different value, and the carious surface will give a different value. So then you will actually be able to see a differential a differential conductivity of alternating current between the sound and the carious tooth structure. So that is how the electrical impedance works. Polarized Raman spectroscopy is almost like into it's kind of like a scan, so you can actually appreciate the images. If you can see the lowermost right the photograph, you can actually see the difference in the sound enamel and the carious enamel. You can actually observe it at an almost like a microscopic level. Yeah. Now, what is Dexis Caribou? This is a recent advance in your caries detection. It is introduced by Cavo. Cavo is a very famous company which deals with handpieces. So all your air rotors and handpieces, the expensive kind, are very famous from Cavo. So they have introduced this device called Dexis Caribou. I have attached a video, a link for the video, so you can please feel free to watch the video. It is a simple video which demonstrates the use of the Dexis Caribou, and it is a compact portable unit, and it uses the same trans illumination principle to help in the identification of occlusal, interproximal, and recurrent carious lesions and cracks. So it makes the enamel appear transparent. This is what I was talking about in the previous slide. The enamel, which is clear from which is not affected by caries, will appear transparent, whereas the porous lesions, that is your carious lesions, will trap and absorb light, because of which it will stand out and you can actually appreciate it. Now okay, so now coming to the oral prophylactic part. So basically, when a patient first walks in, why do we say that one round of oral prophylaxis is important? It is because we can get a clearer picture of the caries for caries assessment after the prophylaxis is done. What happens is, sometimes the stains, the debris, and the calculus, they prevent us from actually getting a clear assessment. They prevent us from getting a clear picture of what the caries attack of the individual is. So after one round of oral prophylaxis, we can actually appreciate the carious lesions better, and we can actually know whether it was actually only debris or whether it was actually caries. So you can see from the photos given on the right, it was a little difficult to actually assess that there was caries on the anterior tooth before the prophylaxis, but after the prophylaxis you can actually see a clearer picture. Yeah. Okay, so now coming to the caries diagnosis, like I was saying, we are using the ICIDAS technique, but I am also going to be talking about the Mount and Humes classification. So according to Mount and Humes, this classification will help you to assess the site as well as the size of the lesion, like similar to our ICIDAS. This is the drawback of GV Black's classification. We do not know the site and we do not know the size. So although it is time consuming because you have to record all the surfaces, but now after the recording of the Mount and Humes or the ICIDAS sheet, you know exactly where the lesion is, and you know exactly what type or what size of lesion you are going to be. Yeah. So according to the site, number 1 goes to your pits, fissures, and enamel defects on the occlusal surfaces. This is similar to your class 1 given by GV Black. The second is the proximal. This is similar to your class 2, 3, and 4. Sorry. And the third site is the cervical 1/3 of the crown. So this is similar to your class 5. Now it is the size which is the attractive part of this classification, because size 0 will show you that it is a carious lesion without cavitation. So this is your incipient lesion. It can be remineralized, so you do not need to treat it. Size 1 is a small cavitation just beyond healing through mineralization, because of which you need to intervene. So you can do your minimal operative procedure. Size 2 indicates a moderate cavity not extending to the cusps, so you do not need to think about cusp capping. Whereas size 3 and 4, you definitely have to do cusp capping, because in size 3, one cusp is undermined and it requires protection from occlusal load, and size 4, at least one cusp or incisal edge is lost, because of which you need to rebuild and restore. Now coming to the concept of caries removal, this is the difference between GV Black's and today's principles. So like I said before, in according to GV Black, we had to use the principle of extension for prevention. So we used to prepare large cavities, whereas now, because we have restorative materials which actually bond to the tooth, we can use the principle of preservation for extension. So we only need to get rid of the carious defect. We don't need to create a specific depth, specific shape or specific size, and we can actually restore it, because the restorative material actually bonds to the tooth, if not chemically, at least micromechanically. The removal of the enamel margin by cutting from a point of greater liability to the point of lesser liability. So this used to happen in the cavities prepared according to GV Black's classification. So we used to first remove the carious lesion, and then we used to extend it onto the healthy tooth structure, so that we can actually form a sound base to receive our restorative material. But this is not the case now, because it is direct and we need to do the treatment only according to the size of the carious lesion. Yeah, so we do not actually need to extend our cavity design into a lot into the healthy tooth structure. GV Black's classification did not take extent into consideration. It only told us about the site, but now the classifications which we use, they consider both the site and the size of the lesion. So so it's not just you, but any other operator who is taking a look at the chart after you will also have considerable knowledge about the site and the size based on the classification you have given. Now coming to the prevention, how are you preventing? You first assess the caries risk of the individual by filling out the chart, and then you can actually assess. You have to promote the knowledge of maintaining good oral health, and how are you going to prevent, that is how you are going to reduce the cariogenic bacteria in the patient's mouth, and how are you going to help in remineralization. So all this is going to be covered too. Now coming to the individual caries risk assessment, this actually helps you to determine the probability of future caries attack in the patient, and it includes both the primary disease as well as the secondary disease. So the primary disease focuses on the new carious lesions which have formed recently in the patient's mouth, whereas the secondary disease focuses on the progression of the existing lesion or the reactivation of the previously carious lesions in the oral cavity. So this is the chart. So we have something like this in our clinics, where we ask the patient a few questions, and then overall, depending upon the answers which the patient gives, whether it be regarding the fluoride exposure, the consumption of sugary foods and sticky foods and drinks, the kind of oral health care which the patient is currently undertaking, whether he or she is regularly going for dental checkups, whether the patient is systemically compromised, whether the patient is under medication, and then of course we have our clinical examination, and then we actually examine and see whether there are new lesions which have been formed within the past 36 months or 3 years, whether any teeth have been extracted within because of caries within the last 3 years, whether there is any plaque, unusual tooth morphology, any orthodontic appliances which are present inside the mouth which are fixed or removable, whether the patient is using it, whether the patient is xerostomach. So all these have a role to play on assessing the overall caries risk of the individual. Now, coming to the attitude of the patient, are they willing to change the way they have been taking care of their oral cavity? So that also plays a role. If the patient is non-willing, then of course you have to treat him as a high risk patient, and you will probably have to recall the patient every 3 months. You have to check the status of the disease. That of course is your own assessment. So you have to check the clinical examination and the radiographic examination to see the caries risk, the caries extension. The saliva, you need to see whether it is the thick ropey saliva, whether the patient does not have much saliva, or whether the patient has the normal low viscosity saliva, because if it is the thick ropey saliva, the washing and flushing action will not be there. Plus the thick saliva does not combat caries attack as well as the normal low viscosity saliva. The pH of 5 and above, of course we know that the pH of 5.5 is known as the critical pH. So it is only below the critical pH that rampant caries attacks progress within the oral cavity of the particular individual. So we have to try to increase this pH value, and thus preventing caries attack in this individual. We have to assess the plaque status of the patient, the diet, what kind of diet this patient is subject to on a daily basis, the number of sugar exposures in between meals, fluoride intake, whether the whether the patient is actually exposed to sufficient amount of fluoride, and what are the modifying factors, whether the patient is systemically compromised, whether this patient is on drugs which actually reduce your salivary flow, whether the patient is actually having any appliances or processes inside the mouth, and whether the patient has recent active caries or not. So based on this, you have to assess the risk of the individual. It is also better to assess at the same time the risk of the community. So if you know that a particular community is actually at high risk of caries, it is always good to address the community as a whole, because in the end you are actually combating dental caries for the entire community. So you can introduce your fluoride programs, or you can actually set up camps, and you can actually go there to educate the patient about the dietary about the ideal kind of meals which the patient should have, the ideal oral health care plan, visits, repeat visits to the dentist. Everything should be educated at a community level, so that you can actually bring down the cost of oral care for the community. Now, how do you reduce your cariogenic bacteria? So basically, how does bacteria attack your tooth surface? So in the presence of glucose, the bacteria will release the enzyme glucosyl transferase. This glucosyl transferase actually promotes the release of your extracellular polysaccharides, because of which because of these two releases, the bacteria actually can start forming the biofilm, and once the biofilm is formed, the bacteria as a colony will adhere to the tooth, and that is when the caries attack begins. So fluoride in high or low concentrations is very beneficial for the patient. Yeah, so how it is beneficial is as follows. So it has its anti-cariogenic effect, and it works in 3 ways. The first, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, is the formation of fluorapatite. So what fluoride does is it actually replaces the hydroxyl ion in the hydroxyapatite and forms the fluorapatite. So this fluorapatite crystal is actually more acid resistant, and it is actually stronger, because of which it is more resistant to caries attack. The second way by which fluoride acts is that in the incipient non-cavitated lesions, fluoride actually helps in the process of remineralization. This is why glass ionomer cements are actually good, because they actually keep on recharging the fluoride content within them whenever the patient is exposed to fluoride, and then it keeps on releasing fluoride at regular intervals. So it not only protects the tooth of interest, it also protects the adjacent neighboring teeth as well. And the third way by which fluoride works is that it has antimicrobial activity. So in low concentration, fluoride inhibits the production of glucosyl transferase. This is what I was talking about 2 slides ago. So glucosyl transferase promotes the glucose to form the extracellular polysaccharides, and this is what helps to form the biofilm for the bacteria. So once your fluoride ion cuts off the production of glucosyl transferase, the production of the biofilm is then minimized. Yeah, the duration of caries attack is then limited to periods only during and immediately after eating. So the caries attack is then drastically reduced. And in high concentrations, that is when the concentration of fluoride is more than or equal to 12,000 parts per million, that is when you have your topical fluoride treatments, the fluoride ion is directly toxic to your Streptococcus mutans. So Streptococcus mutans is the single most important organism which is responsible for your dental caries. So this fluoride ion will actually suppress the growth of or it will actually kill your Streptococcus mutans. And after applying, this effect will last for several weeks. So you are actually preventing caries attack for quite a long time. So just imagine if you are doing it on a biannual basis, how good the oral condition of the patients will be in such cases. Yes. Now, what are the optimal caries prevention measures? You have your diet counseling and sugar substitutes, so you can switch over to xylitol and all your sugar substitutes when compared to your normal sugar. However, please keep in mind, sugar substitutes are not to be prescribed for children, only for patients preferably above the age of 21 if not 18. Yes. And we have fluoridated agents, we have chlorhexidine agents like mouthwashes and gels. Silver diamine fluoride is practiced for children, that will be taught in the restorative program in the next lecture. Then we have CPP ACP, that is your amorphous calcium phosphate and casein phosphopeptide gels. We have ozone. Ozone again will be covered in the coming slides. Then we have the infiltration and Pitt-and-Fisher sealants. So infiltration and Pitt-and-Fisher are more or less similar. It's just that it's the difference in the acid which is used. So in the Pitt-and-Fisher we stick to our phosphoric acid, whereas in infiltration we use the HCl, but not in full strength, of course, because hydrochloric acid can be very irritating, of course. So it is not in very low pH, it is at a significantly diluted value. Now coming to your CPP ACP, how does it work? So basically once you apply this tooth mousse, so this CPP APP is popularly distributed as tooth mousse by the company GC. So what happens is it localizes the ACP in the dental plaque, and this buffers the free calcium and phosphate ions. So what it does is it promotes in your remineralization by promoting the formation of hydroxyapatite again and again. So it starts acting within the dental plaque itself. So the dental plaque, of course, is adherent to the tooth structure, so it promotes the formation of hydroxyapatite on the tooth structure. It thus suppresses your demineralization and enhances your remineralization. Okay, and it also inhibits the adherence of your bacteria to the tooth surface, that is your hydroxyapatite crystals. So it prevents the caries attack as well. What is Sensistat? Sensistat is nothing but your arginine bicarbonate, and arginine is responsible for holding your calcium carbonate particles to the tooth surface. This calcium carbonate it is something like your sustained release. So it slowly releases calcium as and when is required to the tooth surface. So it helps in remineralization as well. Nanohydroxyapatite, this is one of the good recent advances. It is considered as biocompatible and bioactive, and it has gained wide acceptance in the recent years. So it is nothing but very small particles. That is why it is nano-sized. It is nano-sized zinc carbonate hydroxyapatite, and what it does is it shows considerable affinity to the enamel surfaces. So when applied, it actually helps in the remineralization of your enamel surface. Yes, very similar. Ozone, what it does is it disrupts the integrity of your bacterial cell envelope, so it basically kills your bacteria and it prevents the caries attack in that way. So it helps in destruction of bacteria. Infiltration and your Pitt and Fisher sealants are same, like I said in the previous slide. Your infiltration uses hydrochloric acid as your etchant, whereas your Pitt and Fisher sealants, it still sticks on to your 37% orthophosphoric acid. And then of course you are just placing your low viscosity resin, so you're just causing the flow of the resin into the deep Pitt and Fishers. So how does it work? It actually starves the bacteria to death. So this bacteria get trapped between the tooth surface and your Pitt and Fisher sealant. It does not have any contact whatsoever to the external environment, because of which it is getting starved. You are depriving it of the glucose and sucrose and other sugary and sticky foods, because of which it does not have the nutrition to sustain it. So how do you prevent your caries lesions? So you have standard care and you have active care, depending upon the presence and absence of cavitated lesions and the susceptibility to of your patients. So standard care is usually advocated for patients with low susceptibility and no new cavitated lesions, whereas the active care is indicated for the patients who are at high caries. So what is your standard care? This is what you generally advocate to your patients after your oral prophylaxis is over. You recommend the patient to brush at least twice a day using fluoridated toothpaste, and yes, you have to mention a soft bristled toothbrush. We do not want the toothbrush to actually abrade the tooth surface and remove the enamel on a regular basis. So we advocate the use of uh, the soft bristled toothbrush. We advocate the use of interdental brushes and dental floss. Interdental brushes, of course, when food is getting stuck in between, especially in the posterior region. And dental flossing, of course, yes, it plays a vital role in the war against gingivitis. So we advocate that you floss at least once a day at night before going to bed. And the usage of mouthwashes. Of course, the mouthwash is not to be used on a daily basis. That means you're not supposed to use it very regularly, because it causes staining ultimately, ironically, and it also causes dehydration, especially if you're using the alcohol mouthwashes, and it can also cause loss of taste sensation. So because of which the mouthwashes are to be used only for 14 days, a period of 14 days, and then you give a 14-day break and then you resume again. It's not supposed to be used every day for life. Your active care is nothing but the standard care plus the additional factors which I had just mentioned in the previous slides. You have to check out the salivary status of the patient. You have to check the pH, and then of course you have to provide your professional care. So you do your prophylaxis, then you use your fluoride gels, you can apply fluoride varnishes, you can recommend your tooth mousse, chlorhexidine as a mouthwash, and you even get chlorhexidine as a gel which you can apply on the tooth surface. And then of course we have our ART, that is your atraumatic restorative treatment. So that can be your Pitt and Fisher sealants and your glass ionomer cement restorations as well. And this was of course discussed in the previous slides. So this is your CPP APP. This was the GC tooth mousse which I was talking about. So it enhances remineralization and does not allow your Streptococcus mutans to adhere to the tooth surface. Now Servitech, this is the chlorhexidine varnish which I was talking about. It is available in a gel, and it contains both chlorhexidine and fluoride. Both play a vital role in preventing caries attacks, and yeah, so it's a very good product. Fluoride varnish, of course, this is what we generally apply for patients after one round of oral prophylaxis if we feel that the patient may be heading towards an early caries attack. So to prevent it, we apply our fluoride varnish, that is your fluor protector. And this, of course, is the Pitt and Fisher sealants. So this is what, like I said, we starve the bacteria to death by cutting off its source of nutrition in the oral environment. So this was the prevention side for now. The restorative part will be taken in the subsequent classes. I hope you guys were able to imbibe some information at least from this class. If you have any doubts, please feel free to contact me anytime, and I'll be more than happy to have a discussion with you. Okay, thank you very much. Take care.